Hello everyone, my name is Erik van Schoor. I am the co-director of Hope and Glory. With me today are Adrian and Johannes.
Hello, I'm Adrian. I'm the co-director with Erik. I started this project, and here's Johannes.
I'm Johannes. I'm the director of photography of Hope and Glory. And together with Adrian and Erik, we produced this piece as well.
Right, and with us is the wonderful Mark Sexton. He worked on Dark City, Komodo, Babe Pig in the City, Mission Impossible 2, Star Wars Episode 2, Happy Feet 1 and 2, Mad Max Fury Road, Black Panther, and Furiosa. Mark Sexton from Sydney. Amazing that you have time for us. We are really, really happy and proud. We've seen you work on the big screen, or at least like the work that ended up there based on your drawings. Please introduce yourself. How are you doing?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting me. And I've always got time for you guys. I mean, hey, you work in films. You do wonderful things. So art, storyboards. Been doing storyboards for nearly 30 years now. It hasn't affected me in the slightest, really. But yeah, I'm sitting here talking about all things Mad Max with you lovely trio of people over there in Germany.
As anybody might have noticed, Hope and Glory, our movie, is inspired by the graphic novel written by Nicola Thuris and yourself, together with George Miller. You might have seen this beautiful book. And oh, here it is again. It's everywhere. Yeah. So please, could you just tell us and take us back like to the origins of Hope and Glory? Because this storyline is like something that got reused in the video game that may be used later on, but we will get to that at a later point, maybe or maybe not. So can you take us back to the beginning? When did Hope and Glory appear before your inner eyes for the first time?
Before my inner eyes. Oh, God, that's a terrifying thought. So I've worked on Fury Road way back last century, in 1999 to 2001. Don't hold that against me. When we did the storyboards for the film. And worked with George, Brendan McCarthy, Peter Pound. We all sat in a room for nearly 2 years and drew many, many pictures. And there was many discussions about ideas and thoughts of various things we could do with Mad Max. Obviously, we had the film, Fury Road. At that stage, it was going to be with Mel Gibson. It was going to be the last. It was considered that it was going to be the last Mad Max story. That clearly evolved with time and with world events. But there was talk about doing other things like, comics, games, and stuff like that. Mainly pie in the sky. It would be nice if we could do this stuff. And then, of course, as is now, part of popular culture history, as we know, Fury Road then went through a long pre-production period where it went into production 3 times and fell over twice, and eventually went into actual proper pre-production in about 2012, shot in 2013. And then George spent a couple of years mucking around in the editing suite and doing fun things with pictures. At some stage, when I'd finished storyboarding on Fury Road, I'd said to George, is there any chance we could do some comic stuff at some stage? Do some other Mad Max stories? And George said, I'll think about it, Mark. And he did for the next 12 years. Thanks, George. And I was literally working on a terrible Lego film over at Animal Logic and having a really crap time. And I got a call from George's assistant who said, Mark, George would like to speak to you inside. And George said, Mark, I think I'm ready to start doing those Mad Max comics now. And this is 2014. And was like, so I quit that job very rapidly and went in to see George. And he talked about this concept where he had done all these, they'd fleshed out all these stories for the backstories of characters from Fury Road, and that included the Max story, and the Max story had gone through quite a bit of work because they were trying to figure out how Max had become so broken in Fury Road. So at the beginning of Fury Road, we find him, he's hallucinating, he's hearing voices in his head, he's gone almost completely feral, he's, almost, literally insane. And George and Nico Lathuris, the screenwriter on Fury Road, had sat down and actually tried and figured out this story, and George is thinking about using potentially that as a basis for a Mad Max story. And that became one of the stories we told within a series of comic book stories that we put together to release, tied into the release of Mad Max Fury Road back in 2015. I think that's pretty much when I first really got to see the origin of the story and how it might be, and trying to figure out how to do such a big story in such a small number of pages.
Awesome. So you had a limited number of pages, and we had a limited number of minutes we could do our movie with. So it's a similar scenario, and we also wanted to explore this. Especially Adrian, but I let Adrian speak about this, was also interested in telling the story like before Fury Road, and to go like with Max on a journey, to stay with him in his interceptor.
Yeah, I was kind of inspired by your comic, so it's amazing to see you here and talk about this. I saw it like, I don't know, it's like 8 years ago or something like that, and then I thinking all day about it, and I was like, oh, I must make a movie about it. When no one is making a movie about it, so I have to. And then I was inspired by the idea that he's, like you said, he's gone insane or he's feral, and then I think this character is so complicated and so broken that that's what the people want to see. That's what I want to see. And so also the idea that he rebuilt his interceptor from scrap because his last interceptor was gone, like in Mad Max 2, then I thought this idea is crazy. It's so cool. So I could build our own interceptor like he did from scrap and make a movie. And then I met Erik, then I met Johannes, and then we started this project.
And you saw it, right, Mark? Just to make sure to have it on record, you saw Hope and Glory.
I have seen it. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But no, what I think's particularly fantastic is, and I mean, I've never had anything happen like this before, where someone's taken a story that I've been part of putting together and actually adapt it, in a filmic sense. And so, having had the experience of actually watching the film and seeing the work and the passion that's gone into it, it's been one of those wonderful, really lovely experiences where you sit there just going, man, the idea of putting something out there and people then picking it up and running with it and turning it into something else is it's a very rewarding experience. So it's been really fun watching you guys putting it together and doing what you've done and coming out with the end result, which is pretty bloody good. So we like that.
That's amazing. I mean, yeah, basically Adrian lived the Max experience when he rebuilt the interceptor from scrap pieces together with his brother. And I always wanted to tell a story about the character, and this prop really gave me the confidence, okay, if we have this in front of our eyes, if we can touch it, if we could sit in it, then maybe we can build a story around this car and be with him in this car, and maybe not so much like on the surface, but maybe under the wasteland, because the wasteland itself nobody can present and direct it better than George Miller himself. And we don't have the desert here in Germany. So we decided to go underground with it and explore the buzzard caves, explore the sunken city, explore another compound. And then Johannes came into play, because he, as the director of photography, had to bring all these places, which we've never seen before, to life and to make them look cool, to make them make sense, like visually. And so he took your images that you did in the comic, he took Fury Road and rebuilt everything like as Adrian did with the car, and built something else visually to complement all the other movies that already exist.
Yeah, and actually that freed me, because Fury Road is like such an amazing piece, also like visually, especially visually. And if you want to copy Fury Road or Furiosa or whatever, I think you can only lose. So we had to think, okay, what are we able to do with our budget, which was like self-finance and very low. I mean, pretty no budget. We put everything into rooms, into like sunken city, tunnels, hangar, and putting scenes in those places also helped us to build our own visual work, our own lighting and stuff. Fury Road is pretty much a chase, and we only have one chase scene, so that also helped us to like do our own camera work. And as you also know, like Erik draw also storyboards for this movie, and probably Erik, you can talk about this as well.
Yeah, right. So we took the Mad Max Fury Road approach and had like everything like drawn out. It's 179 pages of boards. Not the amount of pages you did. I mean, here you see your name again in the back half of the book. And we just said, okay, if we do action in the wasteland, it has to be kinetic, and it has to be something else which we have not seen in other Mad Max movies, because everybody will say, okay, now you build like a Thunderdome for poor people or for the poor man, or now you have like a huge chase with, I don't know, 5 vehicles, but it's only like, it's not comparable. So we really had to condense everything. We really had to make something small, but that also can stand on its own feet. So we decided on 3 action sequences. The first one Adrian always had in his mind. It's the one with the war boys. I think that, and that's also one he already storyboarded years ago. On that basis, we said, okay, now we have the war boys, we have the world. It's a little bit bigger. In the Hope and Glory comic book, if I remember correctly, war boys don't play a role. It's always the buzzards. It's always the fight in the arena in the beginning. And then we meet like the spiky cars and all these crazy people. And we said, okay, now let's focus on them. Of course, we would have loved to do a fight scene in the beginning. We would have loved to visit Gastown, but we couldn't.
Yeah. Yes, you don't have a $350 million budget. So yeah, I understand that.
But it's amazing to see that these designs of the bullet farm and everything, and Gastown and stuff, we recognize when we watch Furiosa, for example.
Yeah.
The gates, or I mean, I recognized even the peach. I of course I couldn't before, but after reading it again in preparation for this interview, I realized the peach and the seed was always part of the storyline, and it was hidden like on one of the pages. How does it feel like to be part of like planting these seeds that are actually growing into a full-grown movie?
Or a tree growing out of someone's chest. It's another story. Yes. It is quite weird. I mean, obviously, when we did the comics, what we did have is we had access to the Furiosa script, which had already been written. Wasn't in its final form, but it had been written and was in a reasonable degree of finish. And we knew things like a peach, because the film's working title was The Peach. So the peach was actually a key thing within the story, and so we had to pay homage to that and try and tie it all in together. All these stories were very much part of things that have been going on in George's head. And as I said, as I alluded to earlier, a big part of it was trying to then extract the stuff from George's head, put it down on paper, but you have to make decisions along the lines, and there had been no designs done for Gastown. Or the Sunken City or anything like that. There had been the computer game, which you've alluded to, and the computer game came out while we were working on the comics. The computer game was initially going to be officially a prequel to Fury Road, and it was going to be the Mad Max story. Unfortunately, as a result of fun times with Warner Brothers, and particularly Warner Brothers Games, the studio thought it a good idea to shut down work by George, because George was developing it himself with Corey Barlow in-house at Kennedy Miller. And they spent quite a bit of money starting to put it all together, and then the whole thing was taken away by Warner Brothers and given to I can't remember the name of the studio who worked on it, Blizzard or Avalanche or some other
Avalanche.
Avalanche, I think. And so sadly, it went out of George's hands, and they had lots of stuff to work with, but unfortunately the story that was told within the game got changed. There was elements that were used, and so there's enough DNA within it you can recognise it, but it's not the story that George wanted to tell. And which is a bit of a shame, but you see certain. I've never played the game, so I don't even know what's in it, but I know elements of it. But obviously, we were working from the same basic idea when we did the comic, it's awesome to be able to actually see this sort of stuff and actually and then see what you guys did. And obviously, when we do comics, the great thing about comics is you're only limited by the amount of time you've got to write and draw these things, as opposed to how much money have you got. And so we are able to draw lots of big, expansive, huge gladiatorial combats in giant Thunderdomes with a terrible name. Thanks, George. That was one of his Thunderdome Plus. Very bad. But anyway, to be able to draw this sort of stuff, and then fascinating to see what you guys did, which is like, okay, now we have to adapt that again and try and figure out what is the key story that we want to tell, and then be able to actually take out the elements we want and then try and figure out how to do that as intelligently and as cinematically as possible, and watch you making really smart decisions in order to tell that story. And I think you did exactly what you needed to do in order to actually tell that story. So smart to take Mad Max underground, smart to have him already in a car that's broken but still working, and smart to take the heart of the story, which is this key story between Max and Glory and Hope. And I think all very, very, very wise decisions to make. And then fun seeing you guys adding the whole Immortan Jonas of it all into the story as well. So kind of fun.
Yeah, I mean, this story, it was always for me. It was very moving to read it. I think it's the most moving story of all in the comic book.
Yeah.
And there are certain images that I couldn't forget. And of course, Glory. She was I liked it really much, but it made no sense in the based on the locations we had, like to make her the tunnel monkey. Was it right? So she can like enter certain
Yes.
narrow hallways and find stuff for them, and then
Mhm.
she escaped finally. I really liked that, but we didn't have like the location to have her monkeying around,
Yeah.
and so we just put her like in this cell in that old
Well,
yeah, from the Middle Ages, which got like dug out like accidentally when during World War II, people tried to like move like into the mountain to be safe from airstrikes,
Right.
and they actually they just oh, what's that? Oh wow, it's 40 meters deep, and okay. And we thought the same, like when we were scouting for locations, and said, okay, let's do something. If the girl, if Charlotte is like up for it, we will put her down there. Our cameraman actually is, he likes climbing very much, so he was game too. And then the decision was made to use this beautiful location.
That's what you do. That's filmmaking. We've got this. How can we adapt that? How we can adapt the story to use this? And again, smart decisions being made.
There are quite a few moments that are really, really, close to, I think exact adaptations. I hope you can see that now. So the teddy bear, of course, is part of our story. It's integral. In that case, we used the teddy bear from Germany. The company is called Steif. I don't know if you've ever heard of them, but they are really, really famous for the teddy bears. You guys on YouTube, you won't recognize a thing. You just wonder, okay, why are they talking about something else? Yeah, our connection got lost. So yeah. Quick questions for the comic book, and maybe you can answer them for us. How long did it take for you to do this panorama?
Well, I did it twice.
Oh, you did it twice.
The first thing was to actually come up with a bloody design. And we'd done a very, very, very rough design for some early work on the Furiosa. We never mentioned that Furiosa was originally going to be a manga, was going to be an anime back in 2009, 2010. And so there was some very early development work done then. And one of the jobs I had was to design the first looks at Bullet Farm and Gastown. And so I did a design for Gastown then with the help of another artist, Chewy Chan. And then we had to take that and take what George liked from that and then turn it into something for the comic book. So that particular design, I think that one took me a couple of days. It was an interesting one. It's
But people can recognize the bridge. Yeah.
Yeah.
how long did it take to draw the whole comic? I think you didn't draw every single story.
No. The idea was originally, George had in mind that he wanted to have a full graphic novel that was going to come out alongside the film. I started working on the comics in October 2014, but the biggest problem was, it wasn't a problem, but George wanted me to work with Nico Lathuris, who was the screenwriter for Fury Road, because he was obviously on top of what had been done in Fury Road, whereas I hadn't been part of it for a few years. And so I worked with Nico. Nico didn't know anything about writing comics, so getting him on board with that process was a challenge, but we got there. But the problem was getting George's time, because George was editing Fury Road at the time, and we would see him for maybe 10 or 15 minutes once a week, and just trying to get him to come and talk to us and actually talk about stories and how they were coming out and how he wanted them to be done was like pulling teeth. So we didn't start any artwork until January 2015. And the film was coming out in May. And in order to get stuff published before the film came out, we had to have the first story done in late March. And the original idea was I was going to draw everything, and then it just became impossible. So then the idea became, well, quick, let's find artists. And we talked George into actually allowing them to be done as floppies first and then combine them into a graphic novel down the track. And once George got on board with that, it was a lot easier to manage. But yeah, I think I ended up having to do thumbnails for each of the stories. So we essentially wrote by thumbnailing out everything, the same way as I storyboard. And then Nico would take the thumbnails and he would go away and write a script. And he wrote scripts for the Furiosa, Immortan Joe, and Nux stories. And because I was selfish, and I took the Mad Max story. I wanted to do the Max story, and so I didn't need Nico to write a script for me. So I went ahead and did a quick script from the layouts myself. And they had to be okayed by DC. DC had to see what we were going to do, and they had to be okay with the basic stuff and not freak out too much before we actually started off. And then obviously the process of then finding artists, which is the editor's job, which was also interesting because there were many people who wanted to come and play but couldn't come and play right then because they needed to drop everything and then start working on Mad Max straight away. So yeah,
and then there were panels like these. Did you enjoy this?
So that's Nico, just so you know, the history man. Because Nico, who was actually in the original Mad Max back in 1979, he plays a mechanic.
So it is him.
Yes. So that's Nico Athuras. I just used him as the model and just said, Nico, okay, leave your clothes on. I don't want to see you naked, please, but I'm just going to use your likeness because as far as I was concerned, he made an excellent history man. So, but yeah, that writing took a very, very, very long time. So, you know, that's the things we do.
Amazing.
What I loved having read the comic and then watching Furiosa was also like super interesting because so many stories from the comics are like you could already have read them in 2015, but later now in Furiosa you see them for the first time on the big screen. Like the how do you call the people with the stories in their mind?
The history man.
The history man, exactly. For the first time, you see them on the big screen, and I think many people like saw them for the first time. But having known them already from the comic was like a fantastic experience.
Well, the history men originally appeared in the storyboards for Fury Road, but they never actually got shot. And that was going to be because there was going to be a history man in the very first somewhere. We're going off topic, but anyway, that's okay. There was the sequence where Furiosa's Armada leaves for the first time, and then the platform goes up, and all the wretched are trying to climb onto the platform, and they're all being knocked back by the winchman. The history man was supposed to be one of those people, and he's supposed to grab hold of one of the winchmen, and he's hanging on to his boot as they're going up, and he's saying, and he's covered in all those tattoos and everything. He's going, please, I'm forgetting everything. I can't remember anything anymore. I need paper. I just need stuff to write on. Can you please, I just need something. And the guy's going, all the stuff, all the knowledge, it's being lost. And the guy just boots him in the face and he falls to his death. And that was going to be in Fury Road. They obviously never shot it. I think George figured that the history man played a more, as he did in Furiosa, he played more of a narrator's role, which was important. So, but it is interesting seeing that sort of stuff. I mean, one of the things I particularly loved was just little things like in Furiosa, Rictus's room that he takes the child Furiosa to when he steals her from the biodome, and it's filled with baby dolls. And what I love about that is in the graphic novel, there was a story that I literally wrote in half a day because Peter Pound, who was one of the other storyboard artists on Fury Road, contacted me and said, "Can I please do a Mad Max story for the comics?" And I said, "We've already got them done for the comics, but we could get DC to give us the ability to do one for the graphic novel." And so we literally, at the end of it, we literally did a story about the tale of the War Rig, which is art by Peter, written by me. I literally had 2 hours to write it. And there's a story in there of how Rictus, as a young boy, already a monster, he comes across a house way out in the middle of the outback with an old lady who had this massive collection of baby dolls, and she had died after the apocalypse. She died in her cellar, surrounded by these baby dolls, and Rictus had somehow then equated that with that's where babies come from. And so he had this whole weird mythology in the back of his head about, if I collect all these baby dolls, it's going to help my pa give me more babies and stuff like that. And so I love the fact that that idea then informed the dressing of Rictus's chambers in his little chamber in Furiosa. He's surrounded by baby dolls. So little things like that were a lot of fun.
Yeah, I have a question about like your collaboration with George on the storyboards.
Mhm.
Like, how do you collaborate when like designing those pictures? Do you sit on a table together and talk about, like, let's do now picture somehow like this? Who has like the ideas? Does George tell you what he wants, or do you like draw and he says, that's fine, but I want it differently? Or like, how does the collaboration work, working on the storyboard?
It's different for every film, which is not what you needed to hear, but it's true. So with each film that I've done with George, and I have done, God, how many films? I think I've done about 6 films with George now. With each film, he does it differently. With Mad Max, with Fury Road, it was, and I think this is fairly well known, but we all worked in the same room. We sat there with George, and we sat there with George I sat with George for 2 years. Brendan and Peter were there for the first year and 3 months or so. And we all worked on big whiteboards that you stood in front of, and we would talk about everything at the beginning of the day. Brendan would do quick sketches because Brendan was very, very, very good at doing very quick but very clear sketches about concepts and stuff like that. And he's a savant when it comes to actually, drawing insane designs and stuff like that. And they just seem to come out of his head. So between Brendan, Peter, and myself, we'd sit down and we'd scribble stuff on our whiteboards. And a couple of hours after we'd sat down, there'd be a rough plan mapped out about what was going to be done for the day. And then Peter and I would then take what had been figured out, and we would split it between us, and we would work within the same sequence. And I'd do a chunk, and Peter would do a chunk, and I'd do another chunk, and back and on and onward through the sequence. And the whole idea was we were supposed to try and draw the storyboard so it looked like one person had drawn everything. So the reading the storyboards for the film was not this disjuncted experience where, you'd see one person drawing things a different way to another person drawing the same things a totally different way. the idea was that everybody was informed by everybody else. And so that's how we did the storyboards for Fury Road on Furiosa. And George was there the entire time, and he knew to a very reasonable degree what he wanted. And because we had all three of us in the same room, the designs were reasonably well worked out before we even started storyboarding in a weird way. Or we'd work on it during the storyboards, figure it out, and then go back and change the ones we'd already done so that it was the continuity was right. And then when Brendan and Peter left and moved on to other roles or other projects, I just worked with George. Thank God I didn't have to work on the whiteboards anymore because I'm left-handed. And if you draw left-handed on a whiteboard, you wipe out as you go, which is not much fun. So then I got to work on paper. But by then, it was very much me working one-on-one with George and him being very, very clear about the sort of shots he wanted. And it was this iterative process where I'd draw storyboards and then we'd photocopy them, so they're only about only these tiny little frames about that big, tiny, and then he'd stick them all down on big pieces of paper, and then he'd start editing them and he'd shift them around, and then he'd go, all right, okay, so yeah, I think I'm going to do this now. And I want you to change this board to have this, and this guy's going to do this, and can we drop the camera down by 5 inches of that, blah, blah, blah. Let's do a bridging frame here. And we work that way. So he edited his first edit through the storyboarding process. So that was fun and also highly taxing. On Furiosa, he literally just said, because it was much later in the process, and he was already working on, George always uses a new tool with every film he works on. On Furiosa, he had a prevising tool that was used real world physics and all that sort of stuff, so it could be then adapted into the real world while shooting. And he was doing the biggest action sequences that involved locations using that rather than storyboarding. So storyboarding was incredibly brief for that. But for all the other stuff, he just said, I don't have time to sit with you and talk about what I want, so can you go away and do it? And, and then, so I'd literally just draw stuff up and, do stuff like that. And then send it to him and just say, is that what you want? And George would go, oh, yeah, okay, yeah. Occasionally come up with the eye shot, and George would go, oh, yeah, we'll give it a shot. That sounds good. But you're working directly from the script, which is what we didn't have on Fury Road. We didn't have a script. We had a story outline that was quite developed, but didn't have any beats of action or anything like that. So the storyboarding was done more or less as a complete fresh storytelling exercise. But for Fury Road, particularly, he knew exactly what he wanted. I think in his head, and George has got a very strong visual imagination and a very strong visual memory as well. And I think in his head, the films that work the most visually are the Mad Max films. So in a lot of ways, I'd argue that he's already got the film in his head, and you're just trying to figure out how to pull the details out to actually get it down on paper so everyone else can see it. So, that's
I mean, for us, it was also like very important to have the storyboards to be able to tell people our vision. So we always when we had the storyboards, we printed them as books and worked with them on set. We showed the crew, now we're doing this shot, now we're doing this shot, and that helped everybody to have the same direction, the same vision, and so it was amazing to work with storyboards. So
that's why they're there. They're more than anything. They're a communication tool, getting everybody on the same page, as it were, so that everyone's going the same direction. And they're a great tool for pre-planning, for budgeting, for figuring out what you're going to see in shot, and then doing something different on the day and realizing that none of that makes any difference. But that's filmmaking. George himself says, with Fury Road is 80% the storyboards and 20% stuff they made up on the day out of necessity. Usually making it more efficient by realizing we can actually combine all that into a single shot, or actually that stuff we don't need. And certainly on Furiosa, I know there's quite a sizable sequence I did towards the end of the film where Furiosa's hunting Dimitris and his gang, and there's this whole elaborate sequence that George had where Dimitris does this whole back and forth between him and his cronies, trying to make them all decoys without them realizing what he's done. And there was going to be this whole stuff where he's playing them off against each other. And in the end, none of that got done because it was the wrong place for it. It was too slow. And so they just cut it out. And it was just like, he literally just says, "We've got no time for goodbyes. It's been great. Off you go, bugger off." And they all jump on bikes and drive. And you sit there just going, yeah, that's what needed to happen. And with you guys, that's what needed to happen as well on the day. Yeah, we'd love to do that. But why don't we just do this to combine it all? And saves you time, or you're running out of time. You need to do it. And that's the filmmaking process. You can't be precious about your storyboards.
No. Which sequence is your favorite of Furiosa? Just want to ask you this.
Obviously the mortar fly attack on the war truck is pretty amazing. But I do really love that sequence of Furiosa and her mother escaping and being hunted, and that whole sequence working. I think that worked really well. And it's scarily close to the storyboards in a lot of ways, which was lovely because there was just something about that sequence that just worked from the very get-go. It was a powerful sequence, and there was the little grace notes that were thrown in. I suggested George that have Mary Jabassa when she's talking to Furiosa and saying, "Promise me you'll go back," that she says it directly to camera. Because that's a really important moment where it's got to speak not just to Furiosa but to the audience. This is a moment, because that's the key thing that shapes the rest of her life. She makes that promise and then she breaks it, and in a lot of ways she's then dealing with the guilt that she thinks she's responsible for her mother's death because she broke the promise straight away, which is the key to the character. So that is one that I'm particularly proud of. But there's lots of little moments in there that you go, it's all great.
The design of Furiosa's mother is pretty similar to Hope's design in your comic book. The skull and everything. I mean, it was a proper skull there, but is that intentional, or do you know anything about that? No.
Honestly, that I didn't know about. And in fact, I must admit, I had actually forgotten about that. So thanks for pointing that out. I'd completely forgotten about that. So I don't know. Don't know whether people looked at it. I mean, maybe it did. But then again, to a certain degree, you'd also argue, well, that's actually a reasonably easy to come by design idea. And I did it. I did one that I had to do reasonably fast. The skull seemed like a good one, with a friendly face behind a skull. And the same thing was done in Furiosa. So as much as I'd like to say, that was my idea, I'm pretty damn sure that was complete coincidence. But who knows? Who knows? Someone might have seen it. But.
And did I see that correctly, that Charlize Theron's face was put onto Anya Taylor-Joyce in the last shot of Furiosa when she's heading for the Warwick? Have I seen that correctly?
No, that's not right. And the reason why that's not right is that shot was actually shot when they were making Fury Road. That was actually a sequence that George shot.
It's this one, right? It's exactly this shot.
That's the one. Yep. George shot that sequence because he thought they might do it at the beginning of the film. And I'm pretty sure Margie Sexton, his editor and wife, just said, George, don't be stupid. You don't need that. It ruins the surprise of the wives being in the truck. So why would you do that? And so it hit the cutting room floor, metaphorically speaking, and George then, of course, repurposed it for Furiosa. So yes, that is Charlize Theron's face in there.
Nice.
Very cool. And you always told us now it's very hard to get a hold of George Miller because he's so busy and has so much on his mind. Our question, do you know anything about the fact that he's seen Hope and Glory, or did he not? Because we sent him, as you know, and as you've helped us, in February, our movie. Do you have any news about that, or is it still a big question mark?
I don't know. I know George was editing Furiosa until literally 3 days before the premiere. And then he's been on the press tour ever since. And now I don't know whether he's just lying on a bed, staring into the middle of the distance going, oh my God, or he's down in Kangaroo Valley somewhere on a farm, staring into the middle distance, looking at wombats. I'm not quite sure what he's doing. So I don't really know. I am hoping to catch up with George sometime reasonably soon and have a chat with him, and I can ask him about that as well as everything else. The challenge of all this sort of stuff is always, especially if there's other things potentially in development, which I can't say much about in the future. There's always that there's always that little tricky thing of, can I watch that, and how might that affect my own storytelling? And so there's always that question that I know George will always ask himself. So whether he's watched or not, I couldn't say, but I'm sure at some stage or another he's going to. And I know I'm absolutely sure that there are other people from the Fury and Furiosa crew who've, I'm sure, already watched it. If they haven't, they will be watching it very soon as well. So, because it's worthwhile, it's absolutely worthwhile watching. It's a lovely little, really well thought out, intelligently done Mad Max experience on a budget, because clearly that's what you needed to do. But the DNA of Mad Max is absolutely there. The amount of work that you guys did putting it together is nothing sort of insane. You guys have you've moved heaven and earth in order to make that film, and it shows. The fact of the matter is that amount of work shows on screen. The way you've put it together feels very authentic, while at the same time being its own thing, which is, I think, exactly what we were trying to do. But it's so recognisably Mad Max, as well as something slightly different, which is, in a way, what every Mad Max film is. Every Mad Max film is slightly different, even Waterworld. But anyway, we won't talk about that. But, you know what I mean, though. They're all versions of a central conceit, and yours sits very comfortably in there. So, I mean, I think that's an absolute testament to the work that you guys have put in, that it feels so authentically Max. So,
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You guys are to be congratulated for doing such a faithfully ambitious and unique little piece of Mad Max filmmaking. And there's not many out there, as far as I'm aware. So it's nice to see a really, really, really good one being done. And as I've already said earlier, it's also fascinating seeing a story that's been done visually already, then being taken and that being used as the basis for your thing, and you very intelligently taking the bits that really, really work in it and then doing something new again and adding your own 50% of magnificent imagination that you guys have come up with, and taking all these little extra bits of being extra ingredients and throwing them together to make something fresh and different and new. So and then watching Furiosa as well and just going, shit, they all really mesh in a weird way. So it's lovely.
Especially since Max is like, okay, spoiler alarm, but spoiler alert. Max, we find Max in Furiosa in a very similar pose, like in Hope and Glory. I mean, it's basically the same, but in our version, he's more like the animal. He's not like the cool guy on a ledge somewhere, but he's afraid. He's like this feral whatever. Listening for every noise, possibly danger from there or not, and really like introverted, didn't speak for a long time. That's why Daniel Grave, our main actor for Max, asked a vocal coach to really like bring down his voice and really damage it, but not like permanently, but for the shooting time. And yeah, to see this and how Hope and Glory complements Furiosa, especially since we're dealing with the buzzards, which are not featured at all, it makes like for a really nice companion piece and not something that cannibalizes itself or it's just the same again. But no, it works together, and then you can get like right into Fury Road. And so people writing us like as far as Mad Max movies or rewatches go, they plan to include Hope and Glory in their rewatches, at least until George Miller like heads back into the world and maybe does the ultimate version of the storyline. Fingers crossed. And so I think I will go back a third time to the theater and see Furiosa again. Because all these, not all these movies, but every George Miller movie is like an experience, and these guys are not here for forever. And if somebody like him with his imagination gets the opportunity to play like on this grand scale, and I mean it's the biggest movie in a way he ever did. It's like on a biblical scale. It's told like an epic. It has these chapters. It has like this huge storyline, and it has like this huge canvas. We see Scrotus for the first time. I think you mentioned him in one panel here as the third son, and you can see so much. So let's make it happen. That you can go back storyboarding another Mad Max movie.
That would be nice. That would be nice.
And have George Miller in the directing chair.
We'll see. I was going to say one thing about your what you say about the actor who played Max, and that's really what you're saying is really interesting, because that's exactly the idea behind what was going to be done with Max at the beginning of Fury Road as well, in terms of he was going to be extremely damaged. I mean the spoilery Max in Furiosa is 15 years before Fury Road. So there's a long stretch of 10 to 15 years between the two. So Max has gone through a fair bit of, sitting on top of rock ledges, looking down at planes and having bad times with people. And the idea that he's really regressed mentally. The original idea was much more extreme. But I don't think Tom Hardy wanted to go that far with him. But the idea, Tom Hardy wanted to more internalize it, whereas with the way we thought about it, Max was actually a person who he couldn't stop talking, and he would mumble to himself, and he'd be like that all the time. And he would only stop when there was people around him, and then it would all be internal. But he had it almost developed this psychological trait where he was terrified of being touched, which I think came out of George's medical training. He was terrified of being touched because he felt like people would steal him. This idea of stealing his personality, stealing his soul by laying their hands on him, which is why this idea that he just wanted to be away from everybody. It was this real absolute need to get away from everybody, as
And
opposed
that's
to
amazing
thoughts.
because we cut a sequence from Hope and Glory, or not a sequence, but a few shots where Hope tries to touch him in the car when he agrees to look out for Glory.
Yep.
And we cut that out because, you know, he was like, I have to send you this unedited sequence because, yeah, do you guys remember?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was exactly that, because he didn't want to get into contact with anyone. And as you said, like here, Max mumbling to himself, you have it in the comic book. You're right here. When he's
Yeah.
walking, strolling through the sunken city, he's constantly talking. Like, you cannot read it. It's so small print, but that's the thing you talked about. Like, Max always mumbling and repeating the same lines and really going mad. Yeah.
Yeah, trying to keep himself together, and also trying to block out the voices. You know, he's hearing all this stuff from, you know, people, and you know, the whole idea behind the story of Hope and Glory is that's the one that breaks him.
Yeah.
He finally, there's someone who actually finally cracks through, and he's just like, "Fuck, I've got to get out of here right now."
Do you think there are other stories that happened to him before Hope and Glory, before the Hope and Glory story that already breaks him?
I'm sure there are other stories that could be told, but we don't. Anyway, we'll see. We'll see what George has in mind.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, who's the old Aboriginal gentleman we see in Fury Road? I mean, yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, there was going to be an Aboriginal gentleman who lived with a Vulvalini in Fury Road, who was just going to appear like an apparition, almost like he was there but not there at the same time. It was a little bit of a mystical element, but the idea of Glory's ghost supplanted that, I think. So it became a simpler concept. You know, so the idea of Glory appearing in Fury Road, and you know, she does that to Max, and Max does that with his hand, which is that forewarning of, you know, it's almost like casting the spell that when this happens, that's your protective reaction. That's the thing that saves him from being shot through the head with a crossbow bolt. Those little bits and pieces, you know. So it's kind of fun throwing that sort of stuff in, and you guys got that sort of slightly mystical feeling in there as well to a certain degree, which worked nicely, I thought. So,
I mean, it's quite a horrific thought, and that's why we played it like almost like a horror movie. When he sees this all the time, especially in the case when he's all on his own, when we are in this claustrophobic setting, and yeah, they are tormenting him, and yeah. No, I mean it's all like in here. It's all like it comes from your imagination. And to have like guys from Germany years later that think about, okay, let's take this, let's build something else on the basis of your thoughts. I mean, it's crazy. It's always showing like, okay, everything is connected, and we are all working from the same material, and we can, you know, these little waves that travel across now literally continents across the sea to Europe, and let us do like this movie, and we can show it to you. And now we are talking. It's so amazing to have like this history, and to have been able to play in the sandbox of Mad Max. It was always a dream come true for Adrian, Johannes, and me. And yeah, it's amazing that you took the time and talked to us.
well, it's because you had a worthwhile dream. And you did it really well. It's awesome. So yeah, no, I mean,
thank you very much. Really.
Why wouldn't I put it that way? So no, thank you for doing what you did. I think, you know, all hats off to you. You know, I really hope. No, by doing this, you know, I've always been a believer, and you know, you do things that you're enthusiastic about, but you believe in it, and you don't have to do them. But you do them because you want to do them. And, you know, I got into the film industry completely by accident, but it was because I pursued something that I've always wanted to do, which is do comic books. And while the comic books didn't necessarily pay off, I didn't end up working in comic books. I got into the film industry through that, and that only happened because I put myself and what I did out there as a, hey, look, this is something that's fun. People responded to it. And I think you guys have done exactly the same thing. You've put together masses of time, masses of energy. You've harnessed the work of, how many other filmmakers that you've worked with to bring this thing together, and you've put it out there. And to a large degree, I think the universe will end up rewarding that. It may not be the way you think it will, but something will come of it. That's as a result of you guys putting it together. And maybe this interview and is a little tiny part of that. But I think bigger and better things will come your way as a result, because you've shown your enthusiasm and love and desire to do these things. I think it's fabulous. So.
Thank you very much for your kind words. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Really.
That's brilliant.
Well, we took a chunk of your day now out of it, but I think it's really worth it, and we can't wait to share this with our audience. And we are hungry for more stories. I hope you're part of beautiful stories being told in the future. Please take care. Hear you very soon. And please, some last words to the audience, maybe some inspiring words to upcoming artists or people who just want to try something daring. And with these words, I think we will say goodbye. Is there anything you want to share?
I've kind of said on the last moment, but no. I mean, look, I think the fact of the matter is, we all are creative in our own ways. I mean, I've always been a passionate believer that everybody starts being able to draw, in a certain way. Every child draws when they're growing up, and what happens is a lot of them just stop. A lot of kids stop at a certain age, and the skills atrophy or fall silent. But the desire to create, the desire to communicate is still there. It's just slightly buried under everything else that happens. But I think the fact of the matter is, we're all creative in our own ways, and I think it's lovely to see people feeling the desire to tell their own stories or tell the stories using other people's characters and stuff like that to do things that are mean stuff to them. And I think seeing what you guys have done is a great example of that. And I think hopefully everybody else out there can actually do something like watch Hope and Glory and think, I don't know, I can do that. Something like that. Get inspired to go and do their own things. I mean, that's what I did. I'm working on Mad Max film, so hey, look, awesome. That's fun. So I think we can all have an opportunity to do that. We just have to be confident enough to do it, while also being terribly, terribly, terribly frightened that it's not going to work, but give it a go anyway. And I think give it a go and see how you go. And don't be scared of the consequences, because the consequences are usually actually pretty good.
Awesome.
But that's me trying to be deep and failing horribly.
No, really, thank you very much. I hope people take away some wisdom today. And on that note, Mark, thank you very much for taking the time. And I say goodbye and hear you very, very, very soon.
Thank you very much.
And best of luck getting the film out there and letting everybody see it. And I hope the response that everybody gives you is, I know the response will be great. So, enjoy it.
Thank you very much. Take care, Mark. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.